Hey, welcome back to another episode of the Unframe of Mind show where we have uncomfortable conversations without a condom. I'm your host, Daniel Wagner.
Hey, Anthony Trewick.
And we actually have a special guest today by the name of Charlie Daniels Jr., who is the son of the late great Charlie Daniels on our show today.
You're listening to the Unframe of Mind show, the place to have the most mind-stretching, unprotected, intellectual intercourse of your life. Your hosts battle the forces of evil by lobbing fiery balls of truth, reason, and evidence over safe room walls.
This late in the day, I like to have a second cup of coffee. My cups of coffee are rather large. I use a German beer stein to have coffee.
And you wonder why you don't ever sleep.
No, I do sleep.
But you get a lot of shit done.
I do get a lot of shit done. I slept until I had an alarm set for 8. I apparently turned it off, and then about 11 o'clock, my wife's like, hey, you know it's 11 o'clock, right? I'm like, well, I fucking do now.
So let's kind of go into the whole specifics.
I am here.
Yeah, right.
So welcome to the show, Mr. Charlie Daniels Jr.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, absolutely glad to have you. I've been looking forward to this interview for quite some time.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you're just waiting to see kind of what's in the world we've got in store today.
Absolutely.
So just I'm glad that you can be on with us and got a ton of questions. Obviously, you've just recently started a new podcast.
Yep.
So let's kind of jump off from there and then kind of roll into other, topics a little later. But kind of wanted to ask you, why did you want to do a podcast about your dad?
After Dad passed, my whole thing has been trying to keep his legacy alive and even expand on it as much as possible. And I just did, for months and months and months, I was really kind of lost as far as I have really, still mourning, didn't really know what to do. And then the strangest thing happened was that, Dad did a book of, he did his autobiography. He did an audiobook for it. He also did, every day he tweeted out words of wisdom that he would say, let's all make the day count. And before that, he'd have some sort of little, country philosophy, cowboy logic, or some sort of thing like that, inspirational kind of things. And he did a book on that. In fact, he actually dedicated it to me, and
nice.
Which was really, was really proud of. And he wrote the book, and it was like, it's like a gift book. It's like a daily, kind of almost like a devotional type thing. And he wrote a little bit more for each one, and they included a Bible verse. And anyway, July 6th happened before he was able to record an audiobook of that. So the publisher still wanted to get an audiobook recording of it, and so they were going to find somebody to try and do the reading, and they were having trouble finding anybody they liked. And Chris Wormer, my dad's guitar player, he engineered his book reading of the Never Look at the Empty Seats, which was his autobiography.
Okay.
And Chris, then, I told him what was going on, and he said, man, you should do it. And I'm like, are you out of your mind? I don't sound anything like Dad.
Right.
It's a dumb idea. He said, no, man, let's try it. So we got this little recorder, and we started doing it, and I thought, I'm so dry. This is just so dull, so monotone. And then we read it a couple of times, and then, I got into the first, couple of paragraphs, and then by the third paragraph, I found myself into this cadence and rhythm that was very similar to Dad, and I was like, wow, this could actually work.
That's cool.
So anyway, and I hate the sound of my voice. I'm sure everybody does when they first hear themselves, and so.
Sorry to interrupt. Absolutely, that's absolutely true. Even as we're doing the show today, I'm still hearing my voice as kind of this whiny middle tone. I just what's wrong? What gives you the right?
I'd have to disagree. I kind of enjoy my voice because it's a baritone. So
you won the vocal lottery, my friend.
Well, anyway, so we pitched it to HarperCollins Christian Publishing, and they said, yeah, let's do it. And unfortunately, they didn't want Chris to do like what we had done before. They wanted me to go into a studio that they were used to and doing it that way. And so I'm thinking, okay, as busy as I am and as not being a professional at this sort of thing, I'm thinking, this is going to take me, a month to do this. Maybe I'll get 10 a day out, and before I start getting tongue twisted.
Mm-hmm.
And we did 100 of them in 2 days and an introduction.
Wow. Oh wow!
And through the course of that, I kind of got used to my annoying voice, and so I thought, okay, so that was what kind of planted the seeds for me, and going, maybe I could do a podcast, because that might be some way that I could kind of expand on his legacy and do a tribute, kind of a celebration of his life, an ongoing celebration that. And of course, I had zero broadcasting experience, zero editing, recording. I mean, I am like completely, out of my element with this whole thing. So,
right.
It was just a matter. And my original idea was for Chris and I to do this. I thought Chris, we would have a good rapport. He would have the touring side of, be able to talk about that side more than I would. I'm able to talk about more of the history and growing up, the personal side of him and stuff. And I thought the two of us together would make a great podcast, like you guys do. You guys kind of, play off of each other and stuff. Mm-hmm. And Chris, unfortunately, as he put it, he had to get a big boy job. So he he took, he's no longer, he's playing like guitar occasionally at the worship band at our church, but he's pretty much getting out of music. And so he's in cybersecurity now. And it became obvious that he wasn't going to have time to do this. So I'm like, if I wait on Chris to do this, I'm going to be waiting a long time. So I just had to finally say, again, it was really getting out of my comfort zone to have to come through and do this and fly solo. Like I said, with, if I had done this sort of thing in the past, or if I had had any kind of experience whatsoever, I would have gone, okay, well, yeah, let's do this. And so your
podcast is called the Charlie Daniels Podcast, and it's I guess a tribute to your father. And as you were talking, I'm just curious, what role has that podcast played for you in helping you to move on and mourn your father's passing?
Well, my mom and I went to a grief therapy thing for a while with another friend who lost her husband really just a month before Dad passed, or changed addresses. A friend of mine, he says he likes to think of it as changing addresses rather than passing.
Oh, that's interesting way to,
I actually kind of like that.
Yeah, so we were going through this program called Grief Share, and I think Mom and her friend Michelle got a lot out of it. Me, I couldn't wait to get out of there. I was just like, I got stuff to do. Yeah. I felt like I didn't really have that much of a chance to grieve because we're all of a sudden, we have no direction. We have no leader. We have, nothing. So I'm like, I got to figure something out. I got something to do. It took me a long time to figure out what it was. But the thing that really kind of became my grief therapy was my writing. And I started, Dad used to do a soapbox he used to do it twice a week. And then he cut down to once a week. When he was working on his books, mostly, but and I wrote a couple of things, but it was not very often. It was maybe I wrote like 4 in like about a 6-year period or something. But a few days after the funeral, there were still some things that were kind of lingering, like people didn't know. Some people thought Dad had died of COVID, and some things like that. And I was just like, I just want to go through and I just chronicle everything. So I started off chronicling the week of Dad's passing. I wrote 4 soapboxes about that week, starting from from when my mom called me that morning to the funeral on Friday. Mm-hmm. And so I did 4 of those. And then after that, I'm like, okay, now what? Do I continue writing? I had a few other things in mind, so I wrote a few more, and then I just kind of kept going where, I've been kind of churning those out. So that kind of helped me also with the podcast. But anyway, all of it together, the writing kind of became my grief therapy. And so I guess you can kind of say this podcast is kind of an extension of that.
Okay. Now, were you, and kind of shifting gears a little bit, were you surprised to see the outpouring support from the city of Mount Juliet when
oh my gosh,
your father passed?
Yes, I was. In fact, that day, I drove behind the ambulance that morning, and because when we figured out it was a stroke that he had, I was like, okay, he had a stroke in 2010. He recovered from that. He's going to recover from this. So anyway, I just drove like a bat out of hell on the bumper, from the ambulance all the way from the house to Summit. Mm-hmm. And anyway, so we got there, and this basically said that he was not going to recover. Mm. And then we ended up. I don't know what I was. First of all, I didn't know what was going to happen. We had kind of a procession that went from the hospital, Summit Medical Center, to Mount Juliet, to the Sellers Funeral Home. Yeah. And as we're in this, we have police escort. We have behind the hearse. We have motorcycle riders that were there to honor Dad and stuff. And anyway, so as we turned from the interstate, got onto Mount Juliet Road, and I start going down, and I see people lining the streets holding signs that said, "We love you, Charlie," and flags and stuff. And at that point, I realized I had made a huge mistake. I had no business whatsoever driving myself. Mm. It just hit me just like a ton of bricks. And I was just bawling my eyes out while I'm driving down the road, because within just from the announcement to when we drove by, it couldn't have been more than an hour, maybe an hour and a half tops. I don't really have any concept of time from that day.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And all I know is that, all I knew was we were taking Dad to Sellers, and the next thing I knew, and in the middle of a pandemic of all things. People are lined up on the side of the road, holding signs, wearing flags, waving flags. And then when we get to Sellers, they had, I guess the fire department had extended a ladder and dropped a flag down from it right in the parking lot. And I was just like, oh, I was just.
I remember seeing that. I remember driving by seeing that.
It was, like I said, I should have had, a friend of mine was there. I should have just, had him drive me or something, but it just never crossed my mind. I had no idea that there was going to be this sort of turnout. I thought we were just going to go down there and then I'd go take care of my mom, and I'm here. I'm like, I'm an emotional wreck as I'm pulling in.
Oh, I'd imagine. And it sounds like what you were just talking about earlier is you had quite a bit of the family in general had quite a bit of reliance on him as the leadership kind of role in the household.
Patriarchy,
yeah. So which is great, but then when you suddenly lose that head leadership, like it's almost like somebody else has to step up in that place, or you kind of find yourself going, oh well, what's my role now? What do I do? Like, how did you kind of navigate those waters after the fact?
Well, I'm still navigating them, to be honest.
Yeah.
I mean.
Oh, I'm sure it's probably a process for you. I mean, that can't be easy at all, No,
I mean, I'm constantly trying to think of, what can I do? That seems to be the question I ask myself several times a day. What can I do to, keep his legacy going? What can I do to promote him? What can I do next year? I'm already thinking about this because I need to start getting merchandise stuff lined up. Next year will be the 50th anniversary of the Charlie Daniels Band.
Oh, wow.
So there's things that I need to, be planning for, just because one thing I do and one thing I've been doing since 2014 has been in charge of the website and the merchandise for the website.
Right.
And, trying to concentrate on anniversaries and stuff. And, I'm constantly thinking. I mean, there's so many things. I have a dream list of things that I'd like to do. I mean, from a documentary to Dad has a children's project that he has recorded a really great demo for, but is trying to find a place for it to land. I have a couple of things that I still want to kind of go with that. I mean, it'd be a kid's kind of animated thing, but not Disney or DreamWorks or anything like that. That'd be too flashy. This is a pretty simple kind of moral thing told with songs and characters and stuff. And I did a bunch of voices on that. So when I say I had no broadcasting experience, I could do some, silly voices and stuff for a kid's thing, but that was about it.
So I just...
Sorry, what's funny is I'm finding a lot of folks who after their famous parents have passed, it's almost like you have to try to find yourself, like, despite the shadow of that's cast from Charlie Daniels. I mean, he's got quite a reputation that precedes him, and I don't know how much pressure you feel to have to amount to that or try to achieve some kind of similarity or some similar. Not necessarily
similarity.
I'm trying to figure out the exact way to put it.
Maybe kind of carry that torch, so to speak.
Yeah. I guess what I'm asking, what I found interesting is that you're literally finding your voice through podcasting and recording the audiobook. You're finding your own place out
His
here.
His own niche, yeah.
Yeah, and that's if you can speak on that, that would be awesome.
Well, it's really kind of funny because a friend of mine who I've known for a long time, but I hadn't really stayed in touch with that much, reached out to me on Facebook. It's probably about maybe 3 weeks to a month before I started thinking about the whole podcast thing. And she said that she had been thinking about me a lot, and she kind of felt that I don't know if it was something that came to her in a dream or, through prayer or what, but she said that she felt like that Dad's passing had to happen for me to kind of become who I'm supposed to become. Something along those lines is for me to.
That's profound. Yeah. That's profound.
Yeah.
And
really
how did that strike you when you heard that?
Well, at first I guess I was a little taken aback because I didn't really. I'm like, it didn't really. I guess I didn't really know how to take it. But as it's gone on, since then and shortly thereafter, I'm like now with, like I said, with zero experience, I've somehow managed to cobble together, a podcast, and, damned if it didn't look like maybe she was right.
Mm-hmm. So I got to ask real quick, have you been really in depth or open about your father's passing and how you've dealt with that on your podcast, or have you really been public with that at all? I've
written about it extensively.
Okay.
And like I said, I thought that I would probably just do a few pieces, the soapboxes, which he called them. People used to get up on their soapboxes out in the town square and talk and stuff, and so that's what he started calling them. So I kind of kept I call mine Soapbox Junior.
I like that. Yeah. Is that kind of like the little fireside chats you used to hear about from?
Yeah. So he, anyway, so I thought, okay, I wrote about his passing, and then I wrote a few other things, and then, I wrote something like around his birthday, and the way I write is I very much pour my feelings into. If it's something about Dad, if it's something political or whatever, then I'll just tell you what I'm thinking. But when it comes to Dad and things that I've been feeling with, I have no problem vomiting it right out there for everybody and tell you. I mean, in fact, I wrote one around Christmas time because Christmas time really sucked, to be honest.
Oh, yeah.
We every year would have a big gathering at our house, and we had hoped to try to keep that going, but with all the COVID concerns and stuff, that we ended up just having like 5 people over. We would have normally 30 people on Christmas Eve and probably even on Christmas Day. And so I think it was Christmas Eve or the day before I started writing, and I just felt like the biggest Ebenezer Scrooge, bah humbug.
Wow.
Just wasn't feeling it, were you?
No, Burgermeister Meisterburger from, Santa Claus is coming to town. It's like I identified with every negative
character that you can imagine. So
the Grinch, Jim Carrey's version.
Yeah. So, and then I can't remember if it might have been Christmas morning. We had some snow for one thing, and I looked outside, and there was the brightest, chubbiest little red cardinal outside the window in my mom and dad's kitchen, just on the front porch swing, and all of a sudden I kind of felt like
he was there with you.
Yeah, I mean, I know, I hear that sort of thing, and no, I don't think Dad, turned into a bird or anything like that, but there is a belief that somehow cardinals, whether they're a window or something, I don't know. And I don't, theologically, I don't know how that lines up, but I know it's something that people, have talked about. And anyway, but it just kind of, like the Grinch, I said, I felt like my heart grew three sizes that day.
Right.
And so all of a sudden I felt more at peace about it. So like I do kind of just pour my feelings out to when I'm writing about Dad. Yes, I definitely pour my feelings out. With the podcast, it's a little more informational and stuff. I will probably get to that. I did share something that happened last year in the podcast. It was the third episode that I did. Last year, like I said, it was not good. And I had been exercising and dieting. I had gotten down to like the lowest I had been in quite some time. And then Dad, passed, and then it was like, okay, I need comfort food. So for about 5 weeks, I was just out of control.
Yeah.
The only thing that kept me from, being able to not walk through the door was I was swimming in their pool at night, and was able to keep that going, or I would have been as big as the house. So one night, for some reason, I got in the pool really late. I mean, it was like 9:00 before I even got in the water, which was like unusual. I mean, it would have been probably, most of the time it'd be somewhere between 6:30, 7:30, something like that, 8, but it was like after 9:00. And so I got in, and I'm swimming, and I kind of do like a weird sort of backwards butterfly. I'm like, it's almost like a cross between a backstroke and a butterfly, where I'm on my back, but flapping my arms to the side, and I'm looking up at the sky. And anyway, and then I would turn around. I may take a minute between laps sometimes. Anyway, when I got back to where the steps were, I saw at the time the only shooting star I'd ever seen outside of a Spielberg movie. It was It was breathtaking. It just floored me. It couldn't have been more than 30 feet above Mom and Dad's house.
Oh, wow.
And 30 feet.
Yeah. I mean, it was right over it.
That's crazy.
And then when it came, then what happened was, and it looked like a miniature comet. I mean, it had like a bright head to it. It had a tail, and it just came across. And then after it cleared Mom and Dad's roof, in the grassy area before that, and then it was still pretty far off the ground, but it broke off into a really bright white light that was about probably maybe 3 to 6 feet long. I mean, it just kind of like went, here came the tail, here came the thing, and then it just went and then disappeared. And it was just like, Dad, you talking to me? I mean, that's exactly what I did. I was just like, I've never seen a shooting star before, and then to see something that spectacular, 30 feet above my parents' house, it was just. And I even had to Photoshop something together to.
Wow.
Obviously, I couldn't. I couldn't go. Wait a second, let me get my phone. So I had to kind of do something to kind of represent what I saw.
Some kind of irresponsible kid next door was shooting off Roman candles and just happened to go
right. Well, considering as far off from every living soul as they are, it would have had to have been a pretty amazing Roman.
Yes. Oh yeah,
yes. huge candle.
Yeah.
So I just kind of going back to what we were talking about earlier, as far as your reaction to the support or the amount of support coming from Mount Juliet. What would you like to say to those that had the opportunity to pay respect to your father, and pay tribute to him? If you had a chance to say something to them, what would you like to say?
Just that it meant more to me and to my mom than I think I can probably even verbalize. And right. It made me incredibly proud. I was always incredibly proud to be his son, but to see the love pouring out for him, and, I'd say that probably most of the people that were there, had not even met him or had just kind of seen him, in passing, or maybe, seen him at a show or whatever. But to see, and again, like I said, this was in the middle of a pandemic. Everybody was still kind of freaking out about, being outside, and then to, to just see that, sort of, coming out to honor him like that, it was just, it made me incredibly proud. And I thank everyone that did, come out and, like I said, and the way it has affected me so much that our friend Gina had sent me a video that somebody had taken of the hearse and all the cars turning into cellars and stuff. Mm-hmm. And I could see, there's the hearse, it's like, oh no, I'm going to be coming up here in just a second. And sure enough, I saw my car and I just lost it.
Yep.
So,
what did Mount Juliet mean to your father? I mean, obviously, you got a park name after your father, and
right.
You drive through Mount Juliet and you see.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, of all the places he could have laid down roots, why Mount Juliet? Is there?
Well, and to be technical about it, since 1979, we actually resided in Lebanon.
Right.
And to this day, that's where, mom and dad's, I think they honorarily annexed dad's ranch into Mount Juliet at one point, some sort of, like some, symbolic type of thing. Right. But, he just, when we did live in Mount Juliet, we lived actually closer to Hermitage, but we were still, in Wilson County and near Lakeview Elementary.
Right.
And then we moved out between my 8th and 9th grade year. That summer, we moved, in 1979, we moved to where they live, where mom still lives. And, he continued, at that point, from Mount Juliet, Tennessee, it's the Charlie Daniels Band. And he just never want to change it. He just felt a real, love of, Mount Juliet. And, I went to school there, even I probably shouldn't say this, technically.
I went to school there as well, so go ahead.
Well, I guess the statute of limitations are up. I graduated in 83, so I don't think they can come back and take anything away from me, but we had...
You said you graduated in 83. I'm sitting there going, I wasn't born till 84.
I was born in 81.
You do not look that old, my friend.
You don't.
Yeah, well... Thank you for saying that. Now I feel like I need to go take my meds or something.
Do you need a walker delivered down there to Lebanon, technically?
Right. But so we knew some people. We knew people, and somebody kind of figured it out. It's like when we moved out to Lebanon, it was just right outside Gladeville. I mean, it was I was literally 1 mile over the line. Oh. And in fact, once I got to where I could drive, then it wasn't an issue. But it's like what my mom would do is she would take me down to this little, to Hunt's Grocery, this little market. And I would go and that's where I would catch the bus until I could drive. And at that point, it's an extra mile. But, we had some friends that kind of encouraged people to kind of just let it go.
Yeah. A lot of people overlook that for you.
Yeah.
Look at you white privileged male. What is wrong with you?
Right.
So just kind of taking us way back to the beginning, what was your earliest memory of your dad? And just kind of give us some insight on what was it like growing up, the son of a, country music artist, a legendary country music artist such as Charlie Daniels?
My standard answer has always been I don't have anything to compare it to other than the fact that he was gone a lot. There's a lot of times that I didn't get to see him, but I always knew that he was outside, out on the road, working, trying to provide for us. And, it was just, that was his job. I mean, it's like, like, what's it like to be the son of a doctor? And it's like, they're, they work long hours and, it's, it just kind of goes with the territory. So, there was a lot of times that I didn't get to see him, but I would go out on the road with him at certain times of the year, like between Christmas and New Year's or, during the summer, I would go out and, and at one time he was doing like 250 dates a year. You go back to like the late 70s, early 80s. Yeah. I mean, he was just...
Can you imagine? doing that many podcasts in a year?
I think we're not even at 500 yet, and we've been doing this for 5 years.
Yeah, not even doing that many podcasts, but going out to different venues, 250 different.
Honestly, I would do it for at least a year, just to get out to see other cities, meet people, and just kind of just explore other people's thought processes, the way the world is, you know. And
so the short of it is, your dad worked his ass off.
Yeah.
Yep. Very much so. But he, people say if you do something you love, you'll never work a day in your life.
I've heard that.
Yeah. And so I think he was the epitome of that. He absolutely loved performing. His highlight of his day was being able to go out on stage, and you would hear, he always started the show with the Tennessee Waltz. They'd start that music playing, and Dad said he'd start getting butterflies, and he was just ready to go out there and give his all for his fans.
Now, I was going to just ask you real quick. We had talked earlier about the 50th anniversary coming up, the Charlie Daniels Band. Has there been any talks or discussions about actually maybe having some sort of tribute concert for him, or?
Well, that just happened on the 18th, how that came about was the 18th of August.
Okay.
It was every year since, back in 1974, the Dad did a show. It was called the Volunteer Jam. It was at War Memorial Auditorium.
Okay.
They wanted to do, they was working on an album called Fire on the Mountain. Mm-hmm. They wanted to do 2 live tracks. And so, Dad had a little bit of success, but, nothing, they couldn't really draw a big crowd anywhere. So they went to War Memorial, which was only about a 2,000 seat venue. And they did this show called Volunteer Jam. It was just, like I said, they recorded the CDB set, and then they also, Dad invited, I don't know if you got some sort of critter flying around.
Yep.
It's gone.
Got him.
I'll jump back to the story in a second. The last podcast that I did, my dad's manager, his dog was in there, and but the dog just laid down at the table. I couldn't see anything, and so we're talking for 20 minutes or so, and then all of a sudden I hear this, thunk, and anyway, and was so oblivious that the dog was still there. I was like, what in the world was that? So anyway, and it was so funny. I just left it in the podcast.
Nice.
So he also invited some people to come down, like Dickie Betts from the Allman Brothers, I think Paul Riddle and Toy Caldwell from Marshall Tucker Band came down, and they kind of just jammed together at the end. They started, jamming. Just it's an art form for really good musicians to be able to get up there and play something unscripted, essentially. And a lot of times it's something that everybody knows, like Kansas City or some blues riff, and everybody just jumps in, and you have somebody kind of pointing and saying, okay, now you're solo.
Wow, that has always floored me.
Yeah,
the level of skill, like they have a jam session every Sunday up here at Hop Springs Beer Park up here. Oh. And you'll go there and you'll see actual professional musicians. And there was a time I got up there on stage to perform a song that my friend and I had written. And we'd never played this for anybody out in public. This was just us. And he shows them the few chords, what it is, and gives them a little bit of direction, not much. And next thing you know, we're going full band. We got the drummer, we got bass, we got lead. I'm like, how is this even possible? These people are so amazing at how quickly they can pick this up. They kind of get a feel for where it's going, and they can just ad lib wherever. And I'm always floored when I see true professionals at their craft.
Well, and on that note, and I won't give any names, but the last couple of jams before Dad passed, some of the artists that were there, and pretty well-known artists, weren't really capable. They didn't fit in to be able to do that, to just jump in and jam. They were used to being much more, playing by the number system or whatever. They weren't good at just getting out there and kind of just winging it. So, but I'm not mentioning any names.
Oh, thank goodness, because I didn't want to have to edit. I didn't want to embarrass anybody. No, right. I totally get it. There's a bunch of folks that can't. They'll play their normal 4-chord progressions and whatnot. But I'm kind of like that. I could never, at least not at my current skill level, get up and start just playing along with people.
But they ended up doing the 2 tracks called one No Place to Go, and then the live version of Orange Blossom Special. Were included on Fire on the Mountain, and the album took off. The album was very successful, and everybody enjoyed doing that show so much they decided they would do it again. So the next year it went from 2,000 seat hall to 13,000, I think, at Murphy Center at MTSU, and Jimmy Hall, Wet Willie was there. The whole Marshall Tucker Band, or as Dad introduced them, the whole damn Marshall Tucker Band.
Nice.
And you had, I think, you had a few other acts. I can't remember who all it was, but then it kind of turned into an annual thing. Then there was Jam 3, 4, and then it kept going up until really like the early 90s, and then kind of took a pause, and then in 2014 actually was the 40th anniversary of the Volunteer Jam, but in 2015 they did a jam called the 40th anniversary Volunteer Jam, and so that kind of brought it back. And then they did one for Dad's 80th birthday. They did one that was a concert that was filmed for Access TV, and then they were going to do this one that was going to be just another jam. It was going to take place last year. I think it was March possibly. And or no, it must have been later. Maybe they announced it then. It was supposed to originally, I think, be in September, and then they had to move it back because of COVID.
Right.
And when everything shut down, but they still had planned on going forward. Then obviously when July 6th happened, that kind of changed everything. So it went from being another Volunteer Jam, and to be honest, I hated the name anyway, because the original name was, and Dad's still alive when they announced this, was Charlie Daniels Volunteer Jam, a musical salute. And I thought, if that doesn't sound like a posthumous tribute show while the man's still alive, I don't know what does. So then it ended up being kind of prophetic, because eventually they tweaked the title into Volunteer Jam, a musical salute to Charlie Daniels. And then it got postponed twice again. It seemed like it wasn't even sure it was going to happen. I mean, looking about, a week before the show, and, the Delta variant panic is setting in and stuff. And I'm like, is this thing even going to happen? And just, thankfully it did. And it was an amazing show. It was, there has been a tribute show, and
excellent. That's been super frustrating. Like all of the different events that I've tried to attend that are like, we're canceling it now.
Well, the only thing that I've attended recently was the Grand Prix that was held back in August.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
You had over 100,000 people that showed up that weekend, and that wasn't canceled. I mean, you hardly saw anybody wearing a mask, and it was almost like if life went back to normal.
If for a moment, right?
But it was also this. It was like the weekend before that, Garth Brooks had just canceled a show here in Nashville, and then he later went on to cancel, more shows. So it's kind of weird to see certain things getting canceled, and then other things just going about like it's everyday life, like nothing ever happened.
No rhyme or reason.
It's weird. It's almost like you're living in an alternate dimension, is what it is, and. But real quick, I actually not real quick, but I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about your dad and his passion for the military. It almost seemed like every time I've seen anything about your father online, there's always some kind of military tie to that. What brought that about? I mean, was he ex-military, or was there something that just kind of got him involved with the military? Just kind of dive into that.
Well, no, and Dad, he did not serve. He actually, and I wish that he had written about this in his book.
Okay.
Because there's a former band member that that left a long time ago, but has been very vocal on social media about Dad, and he remembers certain things a little bit differently than
gotcha.
everybody else does. And let's say that he and Dad would be about polar opposites in their beliefs.
Gotcha. Okay.
So I don't know how much of that plays into it, but he basically called Dad like a draft dodger, and he's putting all this stuff out on social media, and of course I screenshot it because I'm thinking libel,
yeah, right.
If just in case if this was ever gonna come up, I wanted to have the screenshots. I just asked Dad because I knew that there was no way that he was a draft dodger. He said that he actually went to go take his physical, and his eyesight was so bad. And my dad, when I was growing up, he wore thick Coke bottle thick glasses, and so I know damn good and well that his eyesight was terrible. I would put those things on, and it looked like you were in a fog or something. You just couldn't. See anything.
Did you ever, as a mischievous little kid, take his glasses and hide them so he's going around the house looking like Velma from Scooby Doo trying to find a shit?
No, because I would have. Parents back then weren't afraid to spank.
That's right.
I wouldn't have gotten a timeout. So,
I hear you.
But anyway, so I asked him that question. He said that he failed his physical. And I said, I really wish that he had written about that in his autobiography, but he didn't. So anyway, that's why he didn't serve. But when he was growing up, and I've had to give a couple of speeches, and I've mentioned this before. He told the story often about how when he most of the time he grew up all over North Carolina, but he also was in Georgia some. His dad was in the timber business. He was his business was long leaf pine trees that they used for telephone poles.
Right.
And anyway, but when he was in Wilmington, he said he remembered hearing, and he was a little guy. He was, just a kid, but he remembered hearing that since Wilmington was a port city, that there was often ships were being targeted by German U-boats, and it's off in the distance. He says he was too young to remember it, but he heard people say that sometimes you could see fires from ships burning off into the distance from boats that were shot by U-boats.
Wow.
And anyway, then he also told the story about how when he went, his mom, my grandparents took him to church to pray one morning, but it wasn't a Sunday; it was a Tuesday, June 6th, 1944, D-Day, and he said that he realized then that only two things protect America: the grace of Almighty God and the United States military. And so he really got involved with the veterans. And in 1982, Dad recorded or wrote most of his own songs, but somebody pitched a song to to him called Still in Saigon. And it was a songwriter named Dan Daly. And I don't know if he wrote another song, but he wrote the song Still in Saigon, which is basically the plight of a Vietnam veteran returning from combat and dealing with PTSD. And, it says, my younger brother calls me a killer and my daddy calls me a vet. And he just, he's having a really tough time adjusting to life, even 10 years later.
Wow.
So, anyway, Dad recorded the song, and it resonated with a lot of veterans. And so at that point, there was a real big push at the time to try to find the POWs, if there were any left, or the missing in action, killed in action over there. That because there was still, there still are. There's a lot, that have not been ever returned home. And so a lot of the veterans groups started coming to the shows and stuff. And so that, I think, kind of planted the seeds of him being involved with the military. And then he started doing tours of military bases in South Korea and Germany and stuff. And then specifically after 9/11, he did several tours of the bases in the Middle East. And in fact, even played through a hellacious sandstorm I think they only got about 3 or 4 songs into it, and it just got to where they couldn't continue. And he was wearing a black cavalry-style cowboy hat, and the thing was tan by the time he got off stage. There's pictures of it, and it really is. It's unreal how how dusty everything got.
Wow.
So it was like being sandblasted. So then in 2014, Dad and his manager David Corlew.
I don't mean to interrupt you. Real quick. You were just talking about 9/11. What was his reaction to that? Like, we all had that story. Where were you on September 11th?
Yeah.
Where was he, and what was his reaction?
Well, I to tell you where he is, I have to kind of tell you my story as well.
Okay.
I was married at the time, and I was really, again, it seems like I'm always trying to get into shape. And this time I was actually doing it. So I was getting up and I was riding my stationary bike, an exercise bike, the fan bike that has, so it's not just like pedaling. I'm actually getting an arm workout too. Well, my wife at the time, when I turned on the TV, I was going to, get on the bike and start pedaling. And she said, turn on channel 4. And I looked and I saw, it just had not been that long. The first plane had hit. We didn't know anything really. We just was like, my thought was like some small commuter plane had lost control and slammed into the building, because it was pretty close to the top also. Yep. So I thought, well, maybe that's a possibility. And then so I called Dad and let him know what happened. And then I thought, well, to sound as callous as it sounds like, well, that's really sad. I'm going to go ride my bike now. And then about that time, here comes the other plane, and it just at that point it was like, okay, this is not an accident. So I called Dad back and told him that they were actually going to get their carry permits renewed, and so I didn't go in that day. I think we got together and just kind of huddled around the TV watching everything unfold. Then the next the Pentagon and then Pennsylvania. Yeah. So everything, that was just it was just a completely chaotic that day. And I remember my ex-wife and we went up to Mom and Dad's pool, and I remember how eerie it was because they had grounded all the flights at that point. And so to be sitting outside and looking and not see a single jet trail anywhere up in the sky, not to hear planes off in the distance, it was just eerie.
Look, Daddy, there's no airplanes up in the sky.
Yeah.
I was going to say, because you guys weren't too far from the Nashville International Airport.
Oh yeah, they come over all the time. Yep. So it was just really weird. And then he was he wrote a song that kind of got, I think it really resonated with some people, but it also the way he phrased something people had an issue with. He wrote a song called "This Ain't No Rag, It's a Flag," and I think he was kind of almost channeling some of the energy that he did with "In America," because "In America" was written in the Jimmy Carter, the post Jimmy Carter era, where or right at the very tail end of that, where our military was in a mess. We had kind of a lot of things that we're dealing with now. We had inflation was out of control. Gas was crazy, and in fact they even had the malaise factor. That they were telling how bad everyone misery index. That's what it was. How bad it was in the country at the time, and then you had everyone seemed to kind of rally around the 1980 U.S. hockey team beating the
Russia,
and that almost kind of became a bit of a, like, I think it was like probably one of the first USA chants that started. I think that it was at that match, and anyway, some pride, and then Reagan being elected and stuff. It was kind of like the perfect song at the perfect time. Right. And I think Dad kind of did the same sort of thing with this Aint No Rag, it's a flag. And what really people that did not like the song, they said that calling it a rag, and he says, and we don't wear it on our heads. So they said, well, he's basically being racist by saying that, these are, calling the terrorists ragheads is basically which is like Dad always said, if you didn't have anything to do with the attacks on the World Trade Center, the Pentagon, and trying to where the other plane was heading, this doesn't, apply to you. This is specifically about Osama bin Laden, Al-Qaeda, and everyone associated with them. But anyway, and it was the last, if I remember correctly, except for maybe Aaron Lewis, the thing that he did a song with Aaron Lewis from Stain.
It was probably the old Country Boy song. Sorry, that was the country. That's actually when I kind of became aware of Charlie Daniels' music in general, honestly. Yeah. Well, in
2001, shortly after the attacks, Dad released the song, and it got a lot of airplay. It got up into the 30s. And I think in my opinion, what kind of killed it was that everyone went from being, well, okay, we don't need to be angry about this. We need to be, mournful. And I think that at that point, Alan Jackson's "Where Were You When the World Stopped Turning" came out, and that kind of became the tone,
the flagship for that time. Yeah,
that everyone wanted to embrace, as opposed to Dad, which was like, we're gonna go kick some ass, which is what.
Well, didn't Toby Keith? Is it Toby Keith that came out with a song like "We'll Put a Boot in Your Ass"? And
his came out probably, I don't know if it was like 2002 or 2003, but Courtesy of the Red, White, and Blue.
Yes, yeah.
And that was Dad's song was a little more in that sort of vein, but like I said, once everybody kind of felt like, oh, we need to be more somber and sorrowful, then we do need to be pissed off, which I think we can be both, but
So anyway, we got on a tangent because of the 9/11 story, and I wanted to make sure we remember to go back and finish the.
Yeah. Sorry about that. I just knew with him being such a, he's done so much for the military, talking about Charlie Daniels, and when he mentioned September 11th, I just kind of wanted to know what his reaction was. But I didn't mean to get so far off track.
Okay. So. Well, and I'll tell you one other thing. Speaking of In America, he recorded a live version of that, and he kind of speaks before the song and talking about. It was just a few weeks after the 9/11 attacks, and I think I even in my 2 episodes ago, I think I even mentioned this, that he talked about how that song, or how he after 9/11, how much he saw everybody rallying together, and he said, I said that he had seen, it was unprecedented almost, except for going back to World War II, to see how. In step everyone was, and how
united,
patriotic, and the flags everywhere and stuff. And so, he prefaced the live version of In America with that. And then he said, I've never seen us as united as we are. And I think in my podcast, I said, unfortunately, now I said, I don't think I've ever seen us as divided as we are.
Yeah, definitely. That contrast from then versus now is unreal. You'd never thought that, just in a couple short decades that it would go this far.
And it's sad because it almost seems like it takes such a tragedy of that magnitude to bring people together.
Right.
And it should never come to that. No. It really shouldn't. This is something that we ought to live by. But unfortunately, it just like with anything else, it just kind of tapers off over time.
Yep. Yeah.
You can't be patriotic just for a month after September 11th. That stays with you. And a lot of people have forgotten that. And I feel like that's one of the reasons why we are so divided, is because we kind of lost our way, so to speak. And that kind of leads me to my next question I want to ask you is seeing the division that's going on right now, what did your father, because apparently he was, still alive when most of this was going on, but what was what was his thoughts on everything that we see currently going on in our society? I mean, from everything from Black Lives Matter to the way that police are treated. I mean, obviously, I'm sure he probably has some opinions on that.
Absolutely. I mean, he was, he every day, and Dad was really, we had a lot of friends in law enforcement, and every day he tweeted out, "Pray for the blue."
Yeah.
And in addition to other things that. And I still keep his Twitter going, and I just put it on there, keeping Charlie's legacy alive. But every day, pray for the blue, remember 9/11, and Benghazi ain't going away.
That's right.
And a couple other things about the number of babies aborted every day and stuff like that. So, but yeah, Dad's was a really big supporter of our law enforcement officers, and he understood, as most people should understand, except for a lot of politicians, that most of these are good people, and and there are a few bad apples in there, but the majority of them, and the majority of the ones that I know are good people, and they're trying to do their job. Obviously, there are some people that should have not probably been there to begin with, but you can't label everyone, because of the actions of a few.
Right.
So I think that was pretty much his thoughts on that as well. But all the George Floyd thing, all the Black Lives Matter and all of the riots and stuff that were going on last year. I mean, he was appalled. I mean, and not that some people didn't have maybe some actual grievances, but when everyone's being told to stay home and don't go out, and then the night that you had them activists or rioters, whatever you want to call them, going through Nashville, and any other night, if things had not been in lockdown, there would have been a bunch of people down there that would have stomped some asses if any of this kind of stuff had started. But because everything was on lockdown, these people were, and I'm not saying anything, most of the people that I saw that were ransacking things were not black. There was.
It's funny how that.
Right.
It's how it's been in most major cities.
Yeah, Antifa, or the ones that all got their faces covered because they don't have the cojones to show their faces in public. But anyway, so I'm watching all this stuff, and I'm just getting more and more pissed off, and I'm just like, I'm about ready to go get some Mount Juliet boys, go down there and teach some manners. It was just that was, and the one of the windows on the Ryman was busted, and I'm just like, this is not right. This is not okay.
I'm hearing a lot of that. Sorry, I'm hearing a lot of that sentiment amongst many of the folks I interact with. It's like, it seems like there's this groundswell of people that want to jump in and do the job that their government's supposed to be doing for them, and they want to just collect a group of people with like-minded individuals and get out there and do. Like, what was it that actually stopped you from actually following through and doing anything? I'm always curious what that.
Well, I guess probably just a sheer numbers standpoint. I don't know that I could have gotten probably several hundred people together on that short of notice.
Yeah,
but
wait, to be fair, you also didn't think you could do a podcast solo, and here you are.
There you go.
I mean, I honestly, I feel like if a lot more people stood up and actually followed through with what they say, like, I'm not saying you were, I'm not saying you, I'm not even sure what I'm saying. What I am saying is, like, we look at the border crisis right now. I've got a bunch of people that are ready and willing to go down there, basically lock arms and just, guard the border themselves. Yeah. And there's something's not quite giving them that
push.
That push to actually follow through and do it. I was always curious, what is it that's stopping folks from actually
obviously it's
doing anything
financial,
right?
Once you get down there, what do you plan on staying? And what I mean,
no, I get it. I
think what it is a lot of people are so patriotic. That's a good thing.
Yeah.
But when you actually get down to the logistics of it, it's
logistics are
I know, right? So I mean, I think that's what it is, to be honest with you. I mean, I kind of wish we've talked about this before on the show. When I've done all the community service that I have, you have to do it local. If you can't do it abroad, at least do something here at home, because you're still contributing. It may not be down at the southern border, but you can do something else here to make things better. So,
yeah. I think we got off a little bit when I was talking about.
Sorry about that.
Yeah.
No. I mean, we've jumped all over the place, but we're talking about Dad and the veterans real quick. And what I was going to finish up with was in 2014, Dad and his manager David Corlew started the Journey Home Project. It's now called the Charlie Daniels Journey Home Project. But David had done a documentary about a veteran returning home called The Journey Home, and that was kind of the genesis of the idea was to help veterans returning home with just a civilian life, not specifically wounded warriors, but what it primarily is a organization that can fundraise and give the funds to organizations like Wounded Warriors or any of the other needs that they have. Like there's one that they deal with a lot called Code of Vets, and this is a very small operation, and you basically have Gretchen, I can't remember her last name, but she basically PayPal's money to veterans in need. I mean, just like, if they message her and say, what they're dealing with, if they're about to lose their house because of their rent, they can't pay their electric bill for the month or whatever it is they need, they will get the money and she sends it directly to them. And so it's not like That's a great. Big, organization that has to go and take off, all their overhead before they can start giving money. I mean, it's basically, I think Gretchen and her husband and
no red tape, and it just goes to the people that need it.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's really good. So no, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Journey Home does. They try to get the money that they raise into the hands of organizations like that.
That's awesome. That's really cool.
Yeah, so just to wrap things up, I was really curious. You got this podcast going on, and you find it hugely beneficial. It's been helping you cope with everything that's been going on, and I'm just wondering, for far as the future of the podcast, what do you have in store for future episodes and that kind of thing?
Well, I've got, I think, 4 more interviews that are basically ready to be used, and the way I've been doing it is and I don't know how you guys do it. I've been kind of all over the place. Like I said, I have no, real, expertise in any of this. So I've just been kind of making it up as I go. But I kind of had certain things that I wanted to do. I wanted to have some archival interviews of Dad. I wanted to play some music, which that gets a little complicated with podcasting. So I had to work out some deals with our publishing company that publishes, well, it's complicated, but
I can only imagine the legal jungle gym you have to be going through on that.
That is red tape.
Yeah, and on the initial episode, I wanted to use little snippets of songs of Dad's, and that ended up being expensive. And then I'm using Devil as bumper music and all kinds of stuff. So, but I had certain things I wanted to do. I wanted to play a song. I wanted to have the interview that I'm interviewing somebody from the organization. So the first one was Roger Campbell, my dad's roadie for 44 years. The second one was my dad's manager and co-founder of Journey Home. Mm-hmm. I recorded Dad's bass player for 45 years, I guess.
Oh, wow.
Charlie Hayward. Tommy Crane, that used to play guitar for my dad, his brother Billy played on the volunteer jam because we had a guitar player that couldn't play. Chris was, again, he was going through a new job and stuff, so he couldn't play the jam. Well, Billy Crane, Tommy Crane's brother, worked with Dad on a project called Bow Weevils, and it's a bluesy, swampy kind of. I think everybody in the band was kind of really worried that this was going to be what Dad's going to focus on for the next, few years. But it was just a side project he always wanted to do with a producer named James Stroud, who James produced like 2 albums of Dad's, or 2 or 3, I think. Mm-hmm. And back in the late 80s, early 90s. And it was just kind of a really cool thing. Well, Charlie Hayward played bass on that. Billy came in and played slide guitar on it. And so I got both of them. And then I did an episode of just all three of us, talking, because I wanted to talk specifically about the Boll Weevils project because I love it so much. It's a really, really cool. I've got some other things in line. I'm trying to get it worked out where I can interview Eddie Montgomery from Montgomery Gentry because they were big fans of Dad's, and in fact, I got to know them when they were looking for material, and I pitched a song of Dad's to them, which they recorded, and they also had Dad do the song with them, and Dad invited them to become members of the Opry, and in fact, just support. And Dad had only been a member for not that long when he surprised them at the Grand Ole Opry, and came up on stage and invited them to become members of the Opry. And Brad Arnold from Three Doors Down, I've talked to him, and once his touring time, I think he said he'd have some time in October. So I wanted to interview him. Travis Tritt has said that he would sit down with me at some point, trying to get people into people's schedules. But so in addition to people close to the organization, I also wanted to get in people who were influenced by Dad, like Travis and. Yeah. I'm sure there's other artists, but
oh yeah,
yeah. So I'm sure there's plenty that I can choose from. But so that's kind of what I think will kind of get us to the next step is start when I am able to get some of these celebrity interviews in.
I have somebody that would absolutely love to be on your podcast, and his name is Ryan Upchurch. She's a really big fan of your father, so he would be somebody that would be really neat to have on your podcast. To seeing the generation in which he came up, and then obviously the influence that your father has had on him and his music career. So I would definitely reach out to Ryan Upchurch and try to get him on the show. I'm sure he would absolutely love that. Yeah. So.
Yeah, well, I'll keep that in mind.
If you would like to tell folks where they can reach you to find your podcast and whatnot.
Yeah.
As if
really?
Yeah, sorry.
Thank you for that.
He's only got 2 million followers on Facebook. Come on.
Sorry. I mean, you might get a couple more from our show,
Well, there you go.
And we didn't really talk about it. I thought long and hard on the title. It really took me a while to come up with.
Yeah, it seems super like creative.
I had to really get the thinking cap on.
Forward thinking. Yeah, I appreciate the intuitive. What's the word I'm looking for? Crap.
I know what.
Very inventive. Yeah. You have a creative mind for sure.
Right.
Yep. Absolutely.
And as they always say, it's available wherever you get your podcasts. If you're not podcast savvy, which I guess if you're listening to this, then obviously you are podcast savvy. But for those that aren't, I have a part of the webpage at charliedaniels.com/podcast, and I have the Spotify links right there, so people can go directly to it. Because some of Dad's fans are like, where do I find it now? Just go to the podcast thing.
So
podcast at the top of the page.
A sneaky question right here at the end: is there some kind since he was such a prolific writer, was there like some kind of secret archival footage, or not footage, but recordings, a bunch of songs that we can expect to see put in album form?
We want something we have that nobody else has that we can share with the public.
No, I'm just in general. Is there?
Well, actually, and I'll kind of break it down real quick in. From 1997 to the day he passed, Dad's stuff he had his own label called Blue Hat Records, and we do have some masters that I'm hoping to be able to make available. We're in some discussions right now to be able to see about possibly doing something with that. There's also the majority of Dad's catalog is with Sony Epic Records. And there are some tracks. There's several tracks that I know of that we're trying to locate. And the holy grail for me is an album that was scheduled to be released in 1984. I'll give you the Reader's Digest version of what it was supposed to happen. Dad was signed out of New York. All of his albums, even though he he had a lot of success on country radio. He was signed out of New York. He was the largest contract signed out of Nashville at the time in 1975, and they he did several. He had like a 5-album deal, I think, originally with Epic, and they bought his old catalog that was with Kama Sutra Records, which is a division of Buddha, which was primarily a R&B label. But anyway, so in 1984, they kind of got thinking that music was starting to change, and that maybe they should just try and concentrate on country. So Dad was going to release his first album through Epic Nashville, which was CBS Records at the time, and that was the plan. Well, the powers that be at the label decided they didn't like what he was doing. What he was doing was kind of more of a concept album. Like, I don't know if you've ever heard like Willie Nelson's Red-Headed Stranger. It's kind of a bit of a, I wouldn't say it's not like a direct story, but they're all kind of intertwined. It's kind of like telling a bigger story, and that's what the idea of this was. Dad had a short story called Honky Tonk Avenue, and so he wrote a song called Honky Tonk Avenue.
That really sucks. Those are some of my favorite albums when artists actually come up with something inventive, and it's like like those are my favorite. Like there's a multiple artists I've heard like these. They'll try something that's a little off the beaten path of their normal catalog, and it's like those are my favorite items. And it's like when they just, I don't know, you only hear a couple of them, and you're like, come on, I know you got more in you. I don't want to hear the same crap all the time.
Well, and so these are some of my favorite songs, because I wish I could find. I don't know what. I think I had a bunch of stuff that got stolen out of my car when I was going to school in Knoxville, and I think a cassette of that was one of them. But and anyway, so they, from what I understand, they either completely turned the album in, or they turned in, let's say, 75% of it, and they were going to finish it up. Well, the powers that be in Nashville did not like it, and they wanted something more commercial. They wanted something that was more radio.
Of course they do.
Instead of this, more, kind of, cool, intertwined, thing that it was basically about a guy came to town to be an artist, and he's playing a beer joint, and anyway, there's a lot of stuff that goes along with it. But anyway, so they decided Epic Nashville passed on the album. So what they did was they went in, and Dad went back. They released another album through New York. They just went back, just like, okay, bye, see you. They went back in and they recorded a new album, and Dad recorded a song that he wrote called "Drinking My Baby Goodbye." And Dad said, if they want something, that's really rocking, country and stuff, then they're going to get it. But the problem is that even though the promotion and stuff would have been done out in Nashville, it was released through New York, so they didn't get to really completely participate in it anyway. But anyway, so they had a top 10 country single with "Drinking My Baby Goodbye" that was not released through Nashville. So eventually he did come back to Nashville and did an album called Homesick Heroes, and that was released, but at that regime that was they were no longer there anymore. So it opened the door for him to come back to it. But anyway, so we've been talking with Sony, and we're trying to find where this actual album is. And so far, I have not had any success. I have been checking. I've been trying to find it for probably the last 5 years or so. Oh, wow. Now we're doing some negotiations with Sony on some matters, and one of the things that we wanted to get in there was trying to find some of this vault stuff for either us to license for Dad's label to do it, or to possibly have Sony go ahead and release this stuff. So, but the weird thing is that these tracks I know have been recorded, I know they've been mixed, and I know they've been mastered, because one of them ended up on Dad's box set. 3 of the songs ended up as background music in a really uneven Stephen King movie called Graveyard Shift. It had some really great moments, and then most of it sucked. But anyway, so I know these tracks exist. They were mixed. Something was done with them. They can't seem to find it. So
seems awful convenient.
Yeah, right.
Maybe we'll be able to go through, and somebody just put them in the wrong place at the the vault or something. But
yeah, hopefully you can get your hands on all that. That'll be really good.
That's been one of my main focuses, is to get that sort of thing out there. And so there's a lot of things. I have like a dream list of things that I want to see for Dad, but all to keep his legacy alive.
Excellent.
You definitely got your hands full with a lot of projects upcoming, and we definitely look forward to watching his legacy continue on. Obviously through you. So
yeah, listen, man, I sure appreciate you coming on the show today.
Yeah, absolutely.
And opening up your heart to us. And giving us some of the inside scenes.
Well, thank you for having me.
Really cool, and I look forward to seeing more projects from you in the future as well.
Yeah, and we look forward to having you back on anytime. We love chit-chatting with you. And come back, give us updates, and let us know where we're at with things. And hopefully you'll find that elusive album that's been out of your reach for a while. So
I'd love to do it. That's my mission in life. All right. Absolutely. Y'all have a good one.